Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another Eidolon Hunting video. Today's video is going to be going over Oberon, his role in the fight, and my personal Oberon builds. Oberon's a frame that can do a little bit of everything for the Eidolon Hunt, and that's because he can boost your damage, heal, and protect your team from the magnetic procs during the energy spike phase. Personally for me, this makes Oberon a jack of all trades but a master of none, because he's not really going to be the best at any of these roles. There are other Warframes like Volts that will provide the same damage buff that Oberon does, and in terms of healing, Oberon pales in comparison to Trinity. So much so that even if you have Oberon in your team, I'd still recommend having a Trinity, because she's going to protect you against burst damage, and Oberon really only heals over time. And while he does protect you from the magnetic procs, your team needs to be standing on top of your grass for that to take effect, and it won't save you from the damage like Hera will, who by the way is who you swap out for Oberon for the meta strat. In general, Oberon's a solid Warframe to bring to the Eidolon Hunt, and because he can do a little bit of everything, he's quite beneficial, especially in public bounties. In terms of the abilities you're going to use for him, the main one is going to be his 2, called Hallowed Ground, or more often referred to as his grass. When you activate Oberon's second ability, he puts down a field of grass around you depending on your ability range. Ability range on Hallowed Ground affects not only how far it goes out, but also the angle to which it will spread. So without any range mods, this will do a 180-degree cone in front of Oberon. Now if you mod for range, this angle will cap out at 234% ability range, which is going to be a full 360-degree circle around your Warframe. You can also cast multiple instances of Hallowed Ground at once, up to 4. So even if you have low range, you can cast it multiple times to complete the circle if you want. This can be useful for the Eidolon simply to make sure your team is all inside of your grass. But I'll talk about that more during the gameplay section. The more important effect that Hallowed Ground has is that it makes allies who are standing on top of it immune to all statuses. This not only applies to elemental statuses, but it also applies to knockbacks and knockdowns, which means for the Eidolons it prevents the radiation procs from the energy spike phase, in addition to preventing the Eidolons from staggering you when you're trying to shoot them, which can prevent you from damaging them and be very, very annoying. Also, when you combine Hallowed Ground with Oberon's 3 Renewal, Oberon will provide an armor buff called Iron Renewal to all allies within range. Which brings me to his third ability, Renewal. Renewal is a pretty complicated ability, so I'm not going to go into everything, I'm just going to try to cover the things that are relevant for the Eidolons. Renewal basically provides a healing buff that affects all allies and allied units. The amount healed is based on your ability strength. Once applied to an allied unit, it won't fall off unless Renewal is deactivated. Allies can also lose the buff if they go out of bounds like falling in the lake. If your allies do lose the buff for whatever reason, you'll need to recast Renewal to affect them again. Also, if an allied unit is affected by Renewal and then walks on Oberon's 2 Hallowed Ground, they will receive an armor buff based on your ability strength. This is the Iron Renewal. Both the heal and the armor buff aren't really amazing for the Eidolons. Don't get me wrong, they do provide decent survivability, but Oberon really isn't a main healer for the Eidolons. He's more of like a support healer. We're mainly using Oberon's 2 Hallowed Ground to prevent magnetic procs, and his healing is just an added bonus. You can solo heal with Oberon, it's just really not going to be as effective as healing with Trinity. Oberon will also provide a moderate survivability bonus to your pets with his passive Beastmaster. It'll give them an extra 25% armor, shield, and health links in addition to 1 free revive per mission. Not really a make or break ability, but it will help with the combat dying. Now that I've given a brief overview of his relevant abilities, let's take a look at how I built Oberon. I have 2 ways that I like to build Oberon for the Eidolons. One is to give me full range on my Hallowed Ground, and the other is built around using the Augment for Smite. I'm going to be going over the range build first. This build gives me a full 360-degree range on my Oberon's Hallowed Ground, and as you can see it covers a pretty wide area. I like using this because it just lets me cast Oberon's Hallowed Ground once, and then go back to charging Void Strike for the Eidolons. Having a full 360-degree range on the grass lets teammates that are behind me get on the grass easier without me trying to cast it on them directly. This is more relevant in public games where people aren't as organized, but it will just help your teammates find the grass in general, which is always good. But as you can see for this build, I've gone for high range, high efficiency, low duration, and low power strength. I'm really only focusing on my Hallowed Ground here. The heal from Renewal can be useful, but with this power strength it's really not going to be amazing. So to get the range that I want out of this build, I'm running an Overextended and Stretch. I'm then running Fleeting Expertise and Streamline to help with my ability efficiency. The efficiency will help with casting your 2, as well as maintaining your Renewal for that heal as well as the armor buff. Having the lower duration really isn't much of a problem, but you don't want it to be too negative, which is why I'm running Prime Continuity, because you'll only need the grass for the duration of the energy spike. So I find the 78% duration here plenty. And now we come to the ability strength. Here I'm running Transient Fortitude just to ensure my ability strength isn't too negative. Because while I'm not using Renewal for primary healing, it is good to have it not be completely useless. If you want to build your Oberon for higher power strength and give it a better Renewal, you can. I just find that the range is more useful for me, which is why I have this built for range. And then as for my survivability, I have Vitality here. you'll notice I'm also running Hunter Adrenaline. And that's just because Hunter Adrenaline is one of the few ways you can still gain energy while you have Renewal active. If you wanted to, you could also swap in the Renewal augment Pheonix Renewal. But for me, since I'm typically playing with the Trinity, I don't find Pheonix Renewal very useful. Again, though, it's up to you. Pheonix Renewal is definitely not a bad augment. And then finally, for my aura, I'm running Corrosive Projection and Coaction Drift. If you want to, you could also swap in something like Enemy Radar or Deadeye to help out your team. The arcanes for Oberon can be a little different here. I have Nullifiers on simply because they're the most idiot-proof arcanes. But because we're playing Oberon and our grass prevents the magnetic procs, we can swap these out for arcanes like Energize, Grace, or Guardian. It's really up to you depending on what you have available. But if you're playing Oberon, you're not really going to need the Nullifiers. Alright, now let's look at my second build for Smite. I have this built differently because it focuses around the Smite augment, Smite Infusion. This augment works just like Volt's, where if you cast it on an ally, they will gain bonus radiation damage to their weapon. The augment is affected by Oberon's ability strength as well as his duration, which is why here I have positive ability strength and duration. Compared to the previous build, my range is going to be lower, and my abilities are going to cost more. And while the Renewal does technically heal for more with this build, it's harder to maintain, especially without that Hunter Adrenaline. I would say this build is more useful for an organized group that can use the extra damage from Oberon's Smite. But here I've gone for ability range with Stretch and Augur Reach, with power strength from Transient Fortitude and Umbral Intensify. You could just use a normal Intensify here. I just put the Umbral version in since I had the capacity. And then for my efficiency, I'm running Streamline instead of Fleeting Expertise to maintain my positive duration, which is why I'm also running Continuity to offset the lost duration from Transient Fortitude. With again Vitality for survivability, Corrosive Projection and Coaction Drift for my aura, and then of course I'm running Smite Infusion. Honestly, there are a few different ways you can build Oberon for the Eidolons. And because he benefits from so many mods, there's a few different combinations you can try out. Here I've just shown off two of the ways that I like running him, and hopefully I've at least given you an idea of what to build for. As far as the other gear I'm running here goes, I have a Lanka, a Sicarus, a Sarpa, and an Adarza Kabat with Cat's Eye. And if you're playing with Oberon, you're really going to want to run the Madurai Focus School with Void Strike. But now that I've shown how I built him, let's look at some Oberon gameplay. Oberon plays very similar to Harrow, where you're basically just casting your 2 to make sure that you and your team are immune to the magnetic procs, and then transferring back into your operator to charge up your Void Strike. For the most part, it's just rinse and repeating that. You charge Void Strike, take down the shields, cast your grass out, and then go back to charging Void Strike. In the footage here, I just queued up for a public bounty, so it's not really a good example of how that works in an organized group, but hopefully you'll still get the general idea. I try to keep my renewal up as best I can on all my allies, but it's pretty difficult to keep track of it during the fight, and you really want to be spending as much time as you can charging up your Void Strike instead of making sure all your allies have renewal. If you're able to get it on them, that's great, and if not, it's okay too. Like I said, you're really going to want a Trinity in your group to help out with the healing. And if you're using the Smite Augment, just make sure you pay attention to your duration. So with the build I showed off, the duration's almost a minute, and you can refresh the buff on your DPS player whenever you want to. If your group is using the extra damage from Smite, you just need to make sure that the DPS player has that buff active when taking down limbs or the Eidolon itself, which should be pretty simple if you're paying attention. And as for making sure that your team is protected by the grass, it's good to just have a general awareness of where they're all located. Having your grass go out in a full circle around you does kind of alleviate the need for multiple Hallowed Ground casts, but if you see one of your teammates is farther out or out of position, it can be good to reposition and cast grass again. It's definitely going to be situational and based on how much range you have with your Oberon. And you definitely shouldn't be going way out of your way to make sure everyone has Hallowed Ground. Just get it as close to them as you can, and hope they're smart enough to do the rest. But that's going to cover it for the Oberon video. I hope you guys find this helpful for gearing up and playing Oberon for the Eidolon hunts. If you have any questions about something I covered in the video, please leave a comment below. And if you haven't yet, join the Discord. There's a link to it below this video, as well as on my homepage. Hope you guys all have a good one, and I'll see you later.